Elizabeth stared at him like he had grown a second head. $75,000 gone, hidden in silence, and Andre had waited until the very last second to fess up. You could feel the room vibrating with tension. The kids were quietly watching, sensing the storm, while Chuck's jaw tightened in disbelief. And then it hit. Elizabeth didn't argue. She didn't plead. She packed. Bags, kids, everything. In one instant, the move to Moldova turned into a full-blown exit plan. What happens when pride meets betrayal? When someone you trusted so deeply hides the truth just to protect their ego? Could Andre's pride cost him his family forever? The air between them was thick, and Andre's usual charm faltered. His smile wavered, his confidence slipping. He tried to explain, to justify, to convince her it wasn't that bad. But it was bad. It was worse than anything he could have imagined. Elizabeth's eyes weren't just angry, they were resolute. Every silent glance said, "I will not be fooled again." The shock wasn't just the money, it was the realization that trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to mend. Wait till you see how his own behavior traps him even further. Even as she zipped up the last suitcase, you could tell this was more than an argument about money. This was about respect, boundaries, and realizing the man you married might not be the man you thought you knew. And in the next few minutes, every choice he makes will be on full display. Elizabeth had been optimistic about the move to Moldova, picturing new streets, a fresh start, and a chance for Andre and her to finally make something solid for the family. She imagined mornings exploring a different city, afternoons getting the kids settled into schools, and evenings imagining that this big investment property Andre had promised would eventually change their lives. He had sold it as a golden opportunity, a way to secure not just their financial future, but a dream of stability in a country far from the chaos of Florida. But optimism doesn't erase doubt, and doubt had been creeping in for months, tucked into the tiny inconsistencies in Andre's stories. From the start, Chuck had been skeptical. Years in real estate gave him an instinct for what could go wrong. When Andre described the property, Chuck tilted his head, asked practical questions, and listened carefully to vague responses that seemed rehearsed. He saw a pattern. Andre always managed to turn every concern into reassurance, but there was a gap between the promise and reality. Elizabeth, meanwhile, wanted to believe. She wanted to trust Andre's judgment, wanted to imagine that this move could be a clean slate, that the children would thrive, and that she was finally stepping into a life free of constant financial worry. The kids were quietly observant, taking in every glance, every subtle shift in tone. You could see it in their body language. Hesitant steps, fingers fiddling with toys, small glances exchanged between them. They didn't know the full story, but they could feel the tension, a heaviness in the air that no child should have to sense. For Elizabeth, every step through the airport, every suitcase packed, every hand she held tightly was not just about moving to a new country. It was about trying to protect them from disappointment, confusion, and ultimately, heartbreak. Andre, meanwhile, was performing a careful dance. He projected confidence, smiling as though nothing could touch him. He had this ability to make plans sound foolproof, to explain risks in ways that minimized them, to convince Elizabeth that everything was under control. But this was not just confidence. This was pride. Pride that refused to admit mistakes. Pride that made it almost impossible for him to tell Elizabeth the full truth. Months had gone by, and the investment property he had promised would secure their future had become a ticking time bomb of secrecy. He hadn't been malicious, at least not in intent, but he had hidden critical details about the money, about the paperwork, and about the fact that a scam had quietly stripped them of $75,000. As they approached Moldova, tension threaded every conversation. Andre continued to speak with a controlled calm, acting as if the property inspection was just a routine task. Chuck's eyes, however, tracked every detail: the quality of the neighborhood, the condition of the buildings, the inconsistencies in Andre's explanations. He wasn't silent about it either. He asked questions, probing in ways that made Andre stumble over words just slightly, enough for Elizabeth to notice. But she didn't know the truth yet. So she smiled, nodded, tried to follow Andre's lead, and tried to maintain hope for the kids. Andre's secrecy wasn't a sudden act, it had been building slowly, like a storm cloud on the horizon that no one saw until it started raining. Every small omission, every half-truth, every carefully crafted story about timelines, contractors, and expected profits added weight to the situation. Elizabeth, guided by trust and love, was blind to it, hoping for a positive outcome, imagining that Andre's pattern of confidence was just a quirk and not a warning sign. But those who knew him, like Chuck, had already started to see cracks forming. The stakes were enormous. This wasn't about a minor misunderstanding or a small financial hiccup. This was money, yes, but it was also trust. It was about believing in the person you built a life with. It was about the stability of a family and the emotional safety of children who depended on that stability. Each step through the foreign city, every turn into an unfamiliar street, reminded Elizabeth that she was stepping into an environment where she had to trust Andre completely, and yet, the foundation of that trust was already compromised. As they walked toward the property, Elizabeth tried to focus on the positive, the potential of the building, the way the light hit certain windows, the space for the kids to run. She wanted to see hope. She wanted to believe that Andre's plan was sound and that together they could make it work. Chuck, on the other hand, was quiet but observant, pointing out structural concerns, questionable contractors, and gaps in the paperwork. He wasn't trying to be negative. He was trying to protect his daughter and grandchildren from financial disaster. Every skeptical glance he cast at Andre added tension, and Elizabeth felt it in subtle ways, a creeping unease that she couldn't yet name. Andre's pride showed in small, calculated ways. He laughed lightly at Chuck's concerns, waved them off with casual assurances, and maintained a calm, collected exterior. But the truth was clawing at him from the inside. He had hidden details about the investment, about payments, and about the growing evidence that the money might be gone. Each step closer to revealing the property was another step toward a truth he wasn't ready to face. And Elizabeth, unaware of the full scale, remained hopeful, trying to see a future that Andre had already complicated. There was a moment, just before they reached the property, when you could almost feel the tension in the air pause. The kids clung to Elizabeth's hands, sensing that something was off even if they couldn't articulate it. Chuck glanced at Andre, and Andre smiled, masking panic with charm. It was a fragile calm, a moment before the storm, and everyone knew, if not consciously, then instinctively, that something was about to explode. But the real shock isn't the money. It's what comes next. You won't believe what Elizabeth does when she finally sees the truth. The weight of Andre's secrecy, the months of omission, the gap between promise and reality, all converge in that instant. The stage is set, the emotional stakes are towering, and the first cracks of the relationship's foundation are about to become impossible to ignore. In a few moments, hope will collide with reality, pride will clash with truth, and the consequences of every small decision Andre made will hit all at once. Andre led them through the property with a practiced grin, pointing out every corner as if he owned not just the building, but the entire country. "Look at the space here," he said, moving confidently through the cracked floors and peeling walls. Elizabeth followed, trying to absorb optimism from his tone, but each step made her heart sink a little more. Something about the way he laughed at the gaps, brushed off the broken windows, made her chest tighten. He smiles like nothing happened, but you know that's about to backfire. Chuck trailed behind, silent but sharp-eyed, noticing the flaws Andre seemed determined to ignore. Every loose brick, every water-stained ceiling was a testament to months of omission. Elizabeth tried to ask questions, her voice polite but cautious. "Is this what we expected?" she asked, and Andre deflected smoothly, a shrug and a chuckle, a reassurance that felt empty. She sensed it. The gap between his words and reality was growing, and she was starting to see through the mask. You could almost hear the echo of other 90-Day Fiancé stories in the background, Gino dodging accountability, Jasmine caught in a whirlwind of assumptions. Andre's pride mirrored those patterns, He was performing, protecting ego over honesty, delaying confession to maintain the image of control. Fear of vulnerability was controlling him more than reason, and Elizabeth could feel the tension coiling tighter around them. Each smile he offered felt like a warning rather than comfort. As they moved from room to room, the weight of the missing $75,000 hung silently in the air. Andre's explanations became increasingly flimsy, stories shifting mid-sentence, promises of future fixes dangling like thin threads. Elizabeth's frustration grew quietly but unmistakably. She didn't need to raise her voice. The disappointment in her eyes said it all. Each corner of the property seemed to whisper the truth he was avoiding. Andre tried to joke, trying to lighten the mood, but the humor fell flat. Chuck's skeptical glances turned into pointed observations, questioning timelines and asking for receipts that Andre couldn't produce. Elizabeth felt a mix of anger and betrayal bubbling under her calm exterior. She was starting to understand something crucial. This wasn't just a bad investment. This was a failure, to be honest, a deliberate withholding of truth that put the family at risk. You could see it in her stance, the way her shoulders squared, the quiet edge in her tone. "We need to talk," she said finally, and Andre froze for a fraction of a second before masking it with another smile. The children clung to her hand, sensing the tension even if they didn't understand the details. The room felt smaller, more suffocating, as the weight of broken trust pressed down. Andre's pride, in this moment, was more than a character flaw. It was a strategy. He believed he could contain the truth, control the narrative, and somehow prevent Elizabeth from seeing the full picture. But human behavior is rarely that tidy. The more he attempted to maintain the fade, the more obvious it became, and Elizabeth's frustration shifted from disbelief to resolve. The property tour became a theater of tension, with Andre performing confidence and Elizabeth quietly tallying the evidence against him. This moment changes everything, and it gets worse in just a few minutes. The confrontation escalated quickly. Elizabeth's questions sharpened, her patience thinning. Andre's responses grew defensive, a little louder, a little more frantic. "It's not that simple," he insisted, but the cracks were impossible to ignore. Each omission, each half-truth, compounded the betrayal. Elizabeth realized that whatever solution he proposed after the fact could not undo the months of secrecy. Trust, once fractured, doesn't mend with excuses. Andre tried to shift focus, pointing to minor details in the property as if highlighting holes in the walls would distract from the massive loss. It didn't work. Elizabeth's eyes narrowed, taking in not the space, but the pattern, the ego-driven refusal to admit mistakes, the delayed confession, the almost comical attempt to charm the situation away. You could almost hear the echoes of social media reactions to Gino and Jasmine, reminding the viewer how pride often escalates drama faster than any external circumstance. Chuck stepped in, questioning timelines, asking for clarification on payments, contracts, and the real condition of the property. Andre's explanations faltered under scrutiny, his calm exterior cracking. Elizabeth's frustration became palpable. She didn't need proof to know she had been kept in the dark. She could feel it. Every casual shrug, every forced grin was evidence enough. At that point, Elizabeth began packing in her mind, already moving through scenarios where she might have to act decisively for herself and the children. Her trust in Andre was eroding, replaced by clarity that he prioritized image over honesty. The house was a metaphor in real time. Broken, unfinished, and misrepresented. Each step, each glance at cracked floors, was a reminder that pride had consequences far beyond the individual. Andre's ego reached its peak when he attempted a final reassurance. "I have a plan to fix everything," he said, his voice strained but deliberate. But Elizabeth had moved beyond words. She was thinking in actions now, what steps she would need to protect her family, how she would reclaim agency over their lives. The irony wasn't lost. The very pride Andre relied on to maintain control was the same force pushing him toward loss. Even the kids reacted subtly, sensing the tension. One small hand clung a little tighter to Elizabeth's, a silent plea for safety. Andre's performance was unraveling, and the emotional weight of months of secrecy was finally visible to everyone. What had begun as a tour of a property had turned into a confrontation about values, honesty, and boundaries. Elizabeth's frustration reached a point of no return. "I need to step back," she said, her tone calm but firm, every word carrying the weight of finality. Andre's ego made him freeze, struggling to process that his control was slipping. She didn't shout, she didn't plead. She simply acted with the authority of someone who realized the full extent of betrayal. Every gesture, every pack of a bag, every glance at the children reinforced the stakes. Money could be lost, investments could fail, but the damage of hidden truths went much deeper. This was about trust, respect, and the right to feel safe in the person you chose to share your life with. Andre's ego had blinded him to the simple truth: honesty could have prevented this chaos. You could almost hear the silence of the moment screaming. Months of secrecy, fear of vulnerability, and misplaced pride had all built toward this confrontation. Elizabeth was no longer asking for clarity. She was claiming agency, reclaiming her family's safety, and setting boundaries that Andre could no longer ignore. The scene closes with Elizabeth moving decisively, bags packed, kids in tow, and Andre standing in the wreckage of both property and pride. Every attempt at charm, every reassurance, every feigned confidence had failed. The emotional stakes were now clear: trust, family stability, and personal dignity hung in the balance. Elizabeth's decision was swift, almost surgical in its precision. Bags were packed, kids in tow, and Chuck calmly but firmly guided the family toward the car. The tension was thick enough to slice with a knife. Andre's face shifted through disbelief, panic, and a desperate attempt at composure, a combination that said more than any words could. His eyes darted between the packed bags, the children, and Elizabeth herself, trying to gauge if this was a bluff, a temporary outburst, or the final act of an unraveling trust. He thinks he can fix it with a solution, but will it be enough? For months, Andre's pride had dictated his decisions, prioritizing image over transparency. He had delayed the confession, rehearsed explanations, and polished stories, all in the hope that the truth would remain hidden or manageable. Now, that strategy lay in ruins. Elizabeth's abrupt departure was a physical manifestation of the emotional consequences his secrecy had cultivated. Every step she took toward the car was a reminder that ego, when misaligned with responsibility, carries costs that no charm or explanation can undo. The children sensed the upheaval, even if they didn't grasp the financial details. Little Ellie clutched her mother's hand, glancing back at Andre with wide eyes, a mixture of confusion and unspoken fear. Jack held on to Chuck's arm, unsure whether to cry or question why their home felt suddenly unstable. These reactions underscore the invisible but potent impact parental conflicts have on young children. Trust isn't just about money, it's about the feeling of safety and reliability in the people who are supposed to anchor your world. Andre's actions had shaken that foundation. As the car doors closed, Elizabeth didn't glance back. Her focus was clear: protect her children, reclaim agency, and assert boundaries. Andre's attempts to intervene came out in fragments of pleading, a desperate mix of weight. "We can fix this, and you don't understand." But the emotional distance was already too vast. His words carried the weight of excuses rather than accountability. The contrast between intention and consequence was stark. He may have meant to protect their finances or even to shield Elizabeth from stress, but the result was betrayal and fractured trust. He thinks he can fix it with a solution, but will it be enough? Andre's behavior pattern became more evident during this fallout. He had always approached crises with ego-driven control, performing confidence to mask vulnerability. Socially, fans had defended him at times, noting he had invested with the hope of long-term gain. Psychologically, one could argue that fear of failure and social expectation drove him to conceal the truth. But the moment Elizabeth left, the cumulative effect of pride, secrecy, and delayed honesty collided with reality. Good intentions could no longer mitigate the emotional devastation he had caused. Back in the car, Elizabeth's demeanor was calm, almost cold. Chuck and the children provided a buffer of support and security. This was a tactical move as much as an emotional one. She needed space to think, to regroup, and to ensure the children remained grounded. The silent tension filled the vehicle, broken only by the occasional question from Jack, which Elizabeth answered succinctly, carefully crafting explanations that preserved honesty without spilling the unnecessary emotional weight of betrayal. Andre lingered in Moldova, stunned. The property he had tried to present as an opportunity now felt like a trap. He had underestimated the ripple effect of deception on someone who valued trust as much as Elizabeth did. Each moment alone, watching them drive away, was a confrontation with his own behavior. Panic, fear, and a twinge of shame collided with the instinct to spin narratives in his favor. But this time, words alone wouldn't repair the damage. The stakes had shifted from money to family cohesion, and he was out of moves. He thinks he can fix it with a solution, but will it be enough? Elizabeth's return to Florida added layers of complexity. She had to navigate conversations with friends and family while processing her own feelings of hurt and betrayal. Her friend Lauren would inevitably ask questions, and Elizabeth's answers would need to balance transparency with discretion. This moment highlights the nuanced challenge of maintaining personal boundaries while managing external pressures. Transparency in relationships isn't just about honesty between partners. It also involves knowing when and how to integrate community input without compromising autonomy. The children's welfare remained the central priority. Andre's absence, combined with months of secrecy, had eroded a sense of stability. Psychologists often note that consistency and predictability in parental behavior are critical to children's emotional development. Elizabeth's decision to leave, while dramatic, acted as a corrective measure, restoring the framework of safety that had been undermined by Andre's ego-driven actions. It was a reminder that accountability isn't optional when children are involved. Back in Moldova, Andre reached out, attempting solutions, plans, and explanations, but each attempt was filtered through the lens of prior deception. Elizabeth had learned, through experience and observation, that apologies alone without structural change cannot restore trust. She had witnessed the impact of ego-driven delays firsthand and was less likely to allow reconciliation without tangible proof of responsibility. This demonstrates a broader human truth. Actions, not intentions, define credibility in relationships. He thinks he can fix it with a solution, but will it be enough? Fan reactions on social media mirrored the tension in real time. Many expressed empathy for Elizabeth, praising her decisiveness and protective instincts. Others speculated on Andre's psychological motivations, acknowledging that fear of vulnerability and societal pressures on masculinity can drive men to conceal failures. These insights don't excuse behavior, but contextualize it. Reality TV often exposes patterns that viewers can recognize in their own lives. Ego, pride, and delayed honesty consistently corrode trust, regardless of intention. Meanwhile, Andre struggled with isolation, the stark contrast between fan perception and immediate reality amplifying his stress. The absence of Elizabeth's presence forced reflection. Without the buffer of distraction or charm, his pride offered no protection. He confronted the undeniable consequences of concealment, fractured relationships, emotional distance, and a public reckoning. For viewers, it became a lesson in how delayed honesty, even if motivated by shame or fear, is ultimately counterproductive. The narrative tension deepened with questions about the future. Would Elizabeth demand restitution for the financial loss? Could Andre rebuild credibility? How would their children perceive the fractured trust and subsequent reconciliation attempts? Each unanswered question acted as a magnet for audience curiosity, ensuring engagement through uncertainty. He thinks he can fix it with a solution, but will it be enough? Elizabeth's strategic approach was methodical. She communicated with key family members, including her father Chuck, aligning on next steps while ensuring the children's emotional well-being. Every conversation reinforced the boundaries she had established. She was clear that trust, once violated in a relationship, requires time, consistent honesty, and visible accountability to rebuild. For viewers, this was a practical demonstration of boundary setting under extreme emotional stress. Andre's responses, while well-intentioned, were hampered by prior missteps. His failure to disclose the $75,000 loss in a timely manner became the lens through which all subsequent actions were judged. Even if his solution had been sound, the delay had created a credibility deficit that could not be erased overnight. This illustrates a psychological principle. Trust is fragile and often slower to rebuild than it is to break. The children's perspective remained central. They were witnesses, participants, and affected parties, absorbing the emotional cues from both parents. Elizabeth's protective stance served as an anchor, stabilizing their environment amid chaos. Andre's absence emphasized the gap between parental intention and outcome. Even with good intentions, unaddressed ego and secrecy produce tangible emotional consequences for dependent family members. He thinks he can fix it with a solution. But will it be enough? By the time Elizabeth returned to Florida, the situation had evolved beyond a single confrontation. The emotional fallout included strained relationships, the need to reestablish routines for the children, and ongoing negotiations about accountability. The narrative demonstrated that honesty and transparency are not abstract moral principles, they are practical tools for maintaining trust and family cohesion. Every delay, every withheld truth, compounds risk. Andre, left to reflect alone, faced the gravity of his choices. His plan to fix the loss, while potentially effective on a financial level, could not retroactively heal the emotional and psychological impact of months of secrecy. He was confronted with the stark reality that delayed accountability amplifies consequences. For viewers, this moment is a stark reminder: ego-protected deception rarely ends with a happy outcome, especially when family and trust are at stake. Elizabeth's clarity, by contrast, offered insight into decisive action. Her prioritization of her children's safety and emotional stability over financial concerns reinforced the long-term importance of boundaries. Fans watching could empathize with her position, recognizing the courage it takes to act decisively in the face of betrayal. He thinks he can fix it with a solution. But will it be enough? The episode closes without resolution, leaving multiple questions open. Will Andre regain trust? Can financial restitution mend the rift? How will the children process the events? The tension lingers, making viewers eager for the next chapter. Every moment of hesitation, every unspoken thought, and every interaction becomes a seed for the drama yet to unfold. In this emotional fallout, reality TV showcases a universal truth: pride, secrecy, and delayed honesty carry consequences that extend beyond financial loss. Trust, once broken, requires sustained, visible action to rebuild. Intentions, no matter how well-meaning, cannot substitute for transparency. Elizabeth's choices reflect a blend of emotional intelligence, protective instincts, and strategic boundary setting. Andre's struggle highlights the human tendency to let ego override accountability. The story leaves viewers with both a cautionary tale and a source of suspense. The narrative is far from over, and the consequences of ego and secrecy promise to ripple through future episodes. Fans are left anticipating not just a financial resolution, but an emotional one, wondering if reconciliation is possible or if some mistakes leave permanent scars. He thinks he can fix it with a solution, but will it be enough? The fallout from Andre and Elizabeth's confrontation didn't just stay behind closed doors. Social media erupted within hours, timelines flooded with comments, tweets, and memes dissecting every detail. Fans couldn't stop replaying Elizabeth's determined exit, the way she packed her bags without a second glance, kids in tow, leaving Andre scrambling to maintain composure. Some applauded her decisiveness, praising her protective instincts, while others dissected Andre's pride, questioning how ego could push someone to hide a $75,000 loss. The reactions varied, but the emotional energy was unanimous. This wasn't just money lost, it was a breach of trust that resonated on every level. Memes started circulating almost immediately, exaggerating Andre's stunned expression and Elizabeth's assertive stride out the door. One even mocked Andre as a man who thought confidence could replace honesty, while another highlighted Elizabeth's exit strategy like a masterclass in boundary setting. Reality TV fans love pattern recognition, and this episode provided more than enough. Similar themes had popped up across other storylines, from Gino and Jasmine's petty fights to Natalie and Matt's recurring money disputes. Fans began connecting the dots. When money meets secrecy, chaos isn't just likely, it's inevitable. What Elizabeth does next will shock not only Andre, but everyone around them. Commentary threads popped up analyzing Andre's behavior through a psychological lens. People speculated that fear of vulnerability and social pressure fueled his decision to withhold information. It's a classic pattern: pride over transparency, ego over empathy, image over integrity. But fans didn't stop at theory. They dissected consequences. Every post emphasized that the real damage wasn't the money itself, but the way trust eroded. This isn't just a lesson for Andre, it's a cautionary tale for anyone who values relationships. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's supporters were vocal about the stakes, kids, family stability, and moral accountability. Memes and reaction videos highlighted her calm but assertive demeanor, pointing out the stark contrast to Andre's flustered attempts at damage control. People kept asking, if this was your family, how far would you go? Could you forgive someone who withheld critical information about finances, or would the betrayal outweigh everything else? The discussions reflected broader societal questions about honesty, responsibility, and boundaries in intimate relationships. Andre didn't escape criticism, even from casual viewers. Clips of him trying to mask the property loss circulated online, emphasizing the absurdity of pride masquerading as control. Some social media users joked that he could start a new reality show called Ego versus Reality, where charm and denial battle consequences. Others took a sharper tone, pointing out that repeated behavior patterns in reality TV couples often mirror real-world consequences, secrecy rarely ends well, and delayed honesty amplifies distrust. What Elizabeth does next will shock not only Andre, but everyone around them. Beyond humor, the episode sparked serious debate about family responsibility. Social media posts focused on the children, questioning how much they were aware and what impact the tension might have on their sense of security. Some fans empathized deeply with Elizabeth, recognizing the courage it takes to act decisively in protecting children from emotional fallout. Others explored Andre's perspective, noting that while intentions might have been to shield the family from stress, the secrecy instead amplified it. These discussions emphasized one point clearly: good intentions do not negate the consequences of concealment. Fans also noticed parallels to other couples on the show. Just like Gino hiding minor truths from Jasmine or Natalie avoiding financial transparency with Matt, Andre's pride-fueled decisions fit into a recognizable pattern. Social media users connected these moments, suggesting reality TV has a recurring lesson embedded in the drama. When money and ego collide, relationships rarely survive unscathed. Viewers analyzed, critiqued, and even laughed at the predictable chaos, making the social media reaction almost a second layer of storytelling alongside the show itself. What Elizabeth does next will shock not only Andre, but everyone around them. Humor and subtle digs became a social currency. Fans shared reaction videos pointing out Andre's awkward pauses, the way he tried to maintain composure while failing spectacularly, and Elizabeth's calm dominance. Comments ranged from lighthearted, "He thinks he's still in control," but the exit says otherwise, to sharp observations about patterns of repeated behavior in reality TV marriages. Viewers appreciated that the humor didn't attack identity, but highlighted choices and consequences. The line between empathy and ridicule was carefully navigated, adding another layer to the audience's engagement. As threads proliferated, some social media analysts drew attention to recurring themes: ego, financial secrecy, and delayed honesty. These posts reminded viewers that this was more than entertainment. It was a study in human behavior under pressure. Fans debated, could Andre regain trust if he acknowledged mistakes immediately? Would Elizabeth ever return for a conversation, or was the gap too wide? Each question sparked further discussion, engagement, and anticipation for future episodes. What Elizabeth does next will shock not only Andre, but everyone around them. Beyond the obvious fan reactions, broader discussions emerged about relationship ethics in reality TV. Open marriages, dishonesty, and financial mismanagement all came under scrutiny. Social media users drew lessons for their own lives, considering how they handle money and communication with partners. It became clear that viewers weren't just consuming drama, they were reflecting on personal values and boundaries, prompted by Elizabeth's decisive action and Andre's miscalculations. Meanwhile, memes continued to amplify tension. One viral clip showed Andre inspecting the property with a forced smile, captioned, "When you think hiding $75,000 is fine, but reality disagrees." Another portrayed Elizabeth packing her bags like a tactical retreat, the text reading, "Trust isn't a backup plan." These playful exaggerations captured the emotional truth of the situation. The show's drama translated perfectly into social media commentary, keeping fans engaged long after the episode aired. What Elizabeth does next will shock not only Andre, but everyone around them. The ripple effects of social reactions extended to other 90-day fiancé couples. Fans drew comparisons, noticing the same threads of pride, secrecy, and confrontation appearing in multiple storylines. Gino and Jasmine's petty fights, Natalie and Matt's financial disputes, and even past seasons' dramatic exits all served as cautionary tales. Social media became a shared space for analyzing, laughing, and debating, turning viewers into active participants in the unfolding narrative. At the same time, Andre faced scrutiny from both fans and critics. His attempts to frame explanations as problem-solving or protective measures fell flat under social media's spotlight. People highlighted the absurdity of assuming image could replace honesty. Every awkward pause, every strained smile, every failed justification became fodder for commentary. It wasn't personal attacks, it was a behavioral critique, highlighting how repeated patterns in relationships have predictable outcomes. And just when you think it's over, the consequences hit harder than expected. Fans speculated about future confrontations. Would Elizabeth return to Moldova for closure? Could Andre find a way to rebuild trust? Or was the fracture permanent? Social media buzzed with theories, predictions, and reaction videos dissecting every possible scenario. The discussion transcended simple commentary, offering insight into the emotional stakes and practical realities of relationship accountability. The tension wasn't just on screen, it was amplified across the internet, keeping the conversation alive and the anticipation high. Humor, suspense, and psychological insight continued to blend. Fans poked fun at Andre's stubborn pride while respecting the emotional weight Elizabeth carried. The duality of amusement and empathy created a layered social media response, reflecting how reality TV engages audiences beyond the episodes themselves. Viewers were both entertained and instructed, seeing real consequences for choices driven by ego. And just when you think it's over, the consequences hit harder than expected. Elizabeth's next steps became a point of speculation. Social media users weighed in on potential conversations, financial resolutions, and co-parenting strategies. Every fan post, meme, and tweet contributed to a sense of collective anticipation. The story was no longer confined to the screen, it existed in the minds, feeds, and discussions of thousands, if not millions, of invested viewers. Andre's struggle remained central. His attempts at solutions, explanations, and reconciliation were scrutinized publicly, emphasizing the difference between intention and outcome. Fans drew clear distinctions. Wanting to fix something isn't enough when the trust foundation is fractured. Elizabeth's decisiveness highlighted the practical application of boundaries, responsibility, and protection of emotional and familial stability. And just when you think it's over, the consequences hit harder than expected. Across social media, the episode inspired conversations about what constitutes accountability, honesty, and protective action in relationships. Fans debated whether financial secrecy is ever justified, how delayed honesty amplifies consequences, and what role family dynamics play in conflict resolution. Elizabeth's choices were lauded as emotionally intelligent and strategically sound, while Andre's missteps became cautionary examples of how ego-driven decisions unravel trust. Memes, tweets, and reaction videos continued to circulate, reinforcing patterns of engagement and keeping the story alive between episodes. Humor, sharp observation, and psychological insight blended seamlessly, providing entertainment while offering subtle life lessons. Fans were laughing, debating, empathizing, and anticipating, creating a social media ecosystem that amplified the episode's impact far beyond its 20-minute runtime. And just when you think it's over, the consequences hit harder than expected. The larger takeaway resonated beyond the show. Patterns of pride, secrecy, and delayed accountability are universal. Reality TV merely exposes them under a magnifying glass, providing a platform to observe behavior in high-stakes environments. Fans not only enjoy the drama, they internalize the lessons about trust, transparency, and the consequences of letting ego dictate actions. By the end of the social reaction segment, Elizabeth's departure became more than a dramatic exit, it became a case study. Andre's attempts at damage control, public scrutiny, and ongoing tension illustrated how easily relationships unravel when honesty is sacrificed. Viewers remained captivated. Watching as consequences unfolded, behavior patterns were dissected, and social media amplified every moment. And just when you think it's over, the consequences hit harder than expected. The episode left the audience with anticipation, suspense, and a lingering question. How far will Elizabeth go to enforce boundaries, and can Andre repair the damage he caused? The social media reaction not only reflected fan engagement, but also reinforced the episode's emotional stakes, creating a layered narrative that extends beyond the screen. Reality TV drama, combined with online commentary, had transformed into a living conversation, one where trust, ego, and family dynamics are constantly evaluated and reevaluated. The dust was barely settling after Elizabeth's decisive exit, and yet the emotional ripples kept spreading. Watching her walk away with Chuck and the kids wasn't just a dramatic moment, it was a culmination of months of tension, secrecy, and misaligned expectations. Andre's last-minute confession about the $75,000 loss wasn't just shocking, it exposed a fundamental fracture in their relationship. Pride had pushed him to hide the truth, and that very ego, the thing that made him appear confident and in control, became the barrier between him and his family. Watching it unfold, you could feel the weight of every choice, every hesitation, and every unspoken fear. Elizabeth's courage stood out immediately. She wasn't reacting in anger or panic, she was calculating, protecting what mattered most, her children and her own boundaries. This was the kind of clarity that can only come when someone realizes trust has been irreparably compromised. Fans online immediately picked up on it. Posts highlighted how rare it is to see someone act so decisively in the moment of betrayal, and it sparked conversations about courage versus compulsion and integrity versus ego. Andre, on the other hand, became the embodiment of what happens when pride overrides honesty. In countless reaction videos, fans dissected the way he tried to maintain composure, the forced smiles, and the awkward justifications. There was sympathy for his intentions, maybe he wanted to shield his family from stress, but the execution proved catastrophic. It's a hard reminder that delayed honesty isn't protection, it's a slow erosion of trust. Relationships, especially those intertwined with children and shared responsibilities, rely on transparency. Even small lies, when compounded over time, create cracks too big to ignore. You could see the psychological patterns at play. Andre's fear of vulnerability, his desire to maintain an image of control, and his avoidance of confrontation collided spectacularly. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's boundaries were unyielding, and for good reason. She had already invested emotionally and financially in this move, only to discover the truth hidden behind ego. It's a reminder that in real life, just like on reality TV, people respond more to behavior than intentions. Decisions driven by fear or pride may seem harmless in the moment, but consequences accumulate. The children's reactions added an even deeper layer. They were caught in the middle, sensing tension without fully understanding it. Social media discussions emphasized how kids absorb emotional energy, even if they don't grasp the specifics. Elizabeth's priority was clear: protect them from further emotional fallout. Her actions reinforced a crucial lesson. Sometimes walking away is not abandonment, but protection. Fans praised her instinct to act before the damage grew worse, noting that preserving emotional stability can be more important than saving a relationship. Meanwhile, Andre's struggle was raw and very public. He wasn't just dealing with private shame, he was facing a social media storm that amplified every misstep. Reaction threads, memes, and video clips spread across platforms, highlighting how reality TV magnifies natural human flaws. Some viewers were harsh, pointing out that this wasn't the first time pride caused problems for a couple on the show. Others empathized, suggesting that Andre's intentions, though poorly executed, were rooted in fear and a desire to avoid conflict. But regardless of perspective, the consensus was clear: delayed honesty had devastating consequences. This episode also reminded viewers why trust is priceless. Money, property, and even appearances can be regained or repaired. But once honesty is broken, especially in front of family, the fracture is profound. Fans online dissected every scene, highlighting how Elizabeth's calm but firm decision to leave wasn't reactive. It was a measured response to a pattern of secrecy. She didn't yell or escalate. She assessed the risk and acted, modeling a balance of emotional intelligence and practical decision-making. As discussions grew, comparisons to other couples on the show emerged. Just like Gino and Jasmine's recurring conflicts or Natalie and Matt's financial disputes, this situation emphasized how recurring behaviors dictate outcomes. Pride, secrecy, and delayed admissions rarely end well. Social media users pointed out that the dynamics here were relatable to everyday life. Most people have faced moments where honesty was delayed, and the consequences, though not as dramatic, were similar. The resonance kept engagement high, making fans invested not only in the drama but in the lessons. Fans also explored the emotional complexity behind Andre's behavior. Could he have done anything differently to prevent Elizabeth's exit? Absolutely. Immediate honesty, a willingness to accept vulnerability, and transparent communication would have completely altered the trajectory. Instead, ego and fear controlled the narrative, leaving Andre to grapple with the fallout alone. The psychological insights shared in comment threads emphasized that relationships thrive on trust, and one breach can trigger cascading consequences. Every fan analysis reinforced the same takeaway: honesty and courage protect far more than silence and avoidance. Elizabeth's next steps became a hot topic. Would she return to Moldova for closure? Could she engage in dialogue that addressed both financial accountability and emotional betrayal? Social media speculation buzzed with potential scenarios, each more tense than the last. The stakes were emotional, familial, and practical. Fans debated what they would do in her position, weighing loyalty, protection, and forgiveness against trust lost. It was the kind of discussion that extends the drama beyond the screen and into personal reflection. You won't want to miss what happens when they reunite. Even beyond speculation, the episode highlighted the interplay between courage and vulnerability. Elizabeth's decision to leave wasn't impulsive, it reflected an understanding of what she could and could not tolerate. Andre's attempt to mask mistakes revealed the danger of pride left unchecked. The episode underscored that vulnerability is not weakness, it's the bridge that allows trust to survive, even in high-stakes relationships. Fans engaged deeply with this, sharing experiences, empathy, and sometimes their own cautionary tales, creating a community dialogue around the consequences of secrecy. The social media conversation added layers of analysis, humor, and emotional insight. Memes circulated highlighting Andre's awkward handling of confrontation and Elizabeth's decisive exit. Reaction videos dissected body language, tone, and micro-expressions, illustrating that reality TV drama is not just entertainment, it's a study in human behavior under pressure. Fans laughed, cringed, and reflected simultaneously, maintaining engagement long after the episode aired. In many ways, this episode served as a mirror for viewers. It prompted self-reflection on trust, boundaries, and family priorities. The tension between intention and consequence was clear, emphasizing that good motives don't erase the impact of secrecy. Andre's choices reminded viewers how easy it is to let pride dictate actions, while Elizabeth's response showcased the power of courage, clarity, and protection of loved ones. As the episode drew to a close, the anticipation for what comes next built organically. Social media threads buzzed with questions. Would Andre admit his mistakes fully? Would Elizabeth consider reconciliation? Or was this the beginning of a permanent shift? The narrative tension wasn't just on screen. It lived in the conversations, memes, and debates spanning fan communities. Each post, each reaction, each theory created momentum that extended beyond the broadcast. You won't want to miss what happens when they reunite. The next episode promises a critical emotional test. Elizabeth faces decisions that challenge her beliefs about trust and love. Every choice carries weight, and fans are already speculating about the outcomes. Andre must confront the real consequences of pride and secrecy, while Elizabeth weighs family stability against emotional risk. The stakes are not just financial, they are moral, emotional, and familial. The tension is palpable, keeping viewers invested, and the story poised for dramatic escalation. This is what makes reality TV compelling: the intersection of human behavior, relationship ethics, and emotional stakes. Elizabeth's actions serve as both a narrative anchor and a lesson in personal accountability. Andre's struggle highlights the cost of delayed honesty. Social media amplification, memes, and fan engagement all contribute to the suspense, keeping viewers returning episode after episode. You won't want to miss what happens when they reunite. Ultimately, the emotional arc is clear: betrayal triggered by secrecy, pride exacerbated by fear, courage revealed through decisive action, and family protection as the guiding principle. The audience experiences shock, empathy, and suspense simultaneously. Elizabeth's departure isn't just a dramatic moment, it's a lesson in boundaries, honesty, and the consequences of letting ego override transparency. Fans respond because it's relatable, instructive, and deeply human. As the story sets the stage for the next episode, viewers are left asking, will Andre finally realize his mistakes, or is it too late? Every online comment, meme, and reaction video contributes to the tension, reminding us that reality TV drama thrives when behavior, not identity, is under the microscope. You won't want to miss what happens when they reunite. The handoff is clean but loaded with suspense. Elizabeth's choices, Andre's reckoning, and the family stakes ensure that viewers remain emotionally invested, reflecting on their own values while staying glued to the screen. By focusing on behavior, trust, and accountability, the narrative delivers insight, emotion, and drama in equal measure, setting the stage for a must-watch continuation. Next week, Elizabeth faces a choice that will test everything she believes about trust and love. Will Andre finally recognize the cost of his pride, or will secrecy continue to drive a wedge between them? The anticipation is real, the stakes are high, and the emotional resonance lingers long after the credits roll. You won't want to miss what happens when they reunite.